Today we're with Hegstrom, first-year student at the Refugee and First Migration Studies at DePaul. Welcome and thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Kara. Yes, I am a first-year grad student here at the RFMS, with the RFMS program at DePaul. I'm originally from New Jersey. Before I came to this grad program, I lived and taught in Taiwan for a time before getting my current job where I actually teach ESL online. I've been doing that for a few years now and continuing to do that throughout grad school.
What made you apply to the Refugee and First Migration Studies program at DePaul?
Arriving in a new country can be a very scary experience. I've had the privilege of doing a lot of travel, both for work and for pleasure, throughout my adult life. And when you get to a new place, oftentimes you don't know the language, you don't know anyone, you don't have any of those things that make it feel like home. It's a very emotional experience for anyone. And I, going into this with all the privilege that I have, having a family, a support system, the ability to go home at any point, if it didn't work out for me, it got me thinking, as I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, what I wanted to do in grad school. Refugee populations who have to do the same thing, go to a new country and experience all of these very, very scary emotions, but without any of those support systems or without the security net that I had. And it really inspired me to work and advocate for these groups who are having these experiences.
What are some countries where you have had the opportunity to work with refugees?
So when I was an undergrad, I studied for a semester in Nairobi, Kenya. And while I was there, I did an internship in one of the informal settlements there, Kawangware, which has a large Kenyan population, but it also has a large refugee or immigrant population. So there are refugees from Somalia, refugees from Sudan, throughout East Africa. And so the internship that I was doing was a vocational school for teenagers. And, it taught the boys were working on cars, the girls were doing jewelry and sewing, and also getting an education, doing English classes and math classes and all of that. So, some of those kids were Kenyan, but a lot of them also came from refugee families. So that was my first experience working with refugees there.
What are some things that you've learned in the program that has sparked your interest so far?
So I think that the program does a great job starting out in a very broad context. We take classes in the history of migration as well as in international law in a broad sense. And so it gives you the opportunity to kind of discover what you're interested in this field. And then you can kind of tailor your own research and the papers that you write onward from there into pursuing what you're passionate about.
What kind of things do you think the program trains you for?
I think that the program covers a lot of different disciplines. So, we take law classes, we take NGO management classes, we take humanitarian logistics classes. So I think that it really gives you the tools to pursue a career in any one of those fields. And I think that graduating with this degree will help you feel confident moving into the field in whatever way you would choose to do so.
What do you hope to do after you graduate?
I know that I have specific interests that I'm, looking into right now. I know that I would love to work abroad for a few years, and I'm not really sure in what capacity, but I would love to be able to work within, refugee populations internationally for a while.
The program dedicates a full quarter to internships. Do you already know where will you be interning?
So I don't know yet. My internship will start in March of next year. I do know that I would love to do my internship internationally. Our program has some good ties with organizations in Berlin. So I've been, kind of looking into those organizations, seeing what might be a good fit, and just exploring those options right now.
So how do you think, let me rephrase. If you were to intern in Germany, how do you think the language barrier could become a learning experience for you?
Mm-hmm. So some of the organizations definitely require a certain level of German, which is a barrier for me as I do not speak German. Some of the, and people coming into Germany has an interesting refugee program in that in order to integrate refugees into their society, they're really pushing German language classes to get them speaking and learning German. So it would be difficult to work with populations and be an English speaker, whereas people are coming in and trying to learn German. That being said, there are definitely populations coming into Germany from North Africa, different parts of the African continent, who English is their second language. So working with those populations, it's a little bit easier speaking English, being able to connect with them that way.
Yeah, and Germany is one of the countries that received the most influx of refugees in Europe. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. So even just the experience of being there and seeing the hands-on, the different organizations and how the government has been responding to this crisis, and the way that they've handled it a lot differently than we have in the U.S.
In this program, you take classes as a part of a cohort for 2 years. What has your experience been?
I think that the cohort system has been one of my favorite parts of the program so far. We have a very small cohort, so it's given me an opportunity to get to know all of these people on a really personal level. And everyone who I have gone through these classes with has been so supportive. We've really been doing a good job of sticking together and working together. And I'm really looking forward to all of us, going into our respective careers and hopefully continuing that community and continuing to support each other that way.
Tell us a bit about the Rohingya Culture Center. What do you do there?
So I volunteer at the Rohingya Cultural Center. Chicago actually has one of the highest populations of Rohingya refugees in the U.S. At the Cultural Center, the program that I volunteer at is actually funded by a grant from DePaul, and has kind of turned into like a needs assessment of what the community needs there. We go once a week for a few hours, and a group of women and children come in, and we, do different activities. We try to do a cultural exchange. We have conversations, and have really tried to work on like what these women need, what they want, what the community as a whole, like what they could benefit from. So that's really what the volunteer has been about thus far. I know that the program is going forward into next year, so hopefully they'll be able to start addressing some of those things and helping to advocate for this community going forward.
Can you tell us a bit about the size of the Rohingya crisis in this moment in time?
Huge. So there are, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya displaced in Bangladesh currently. The Rohingya that are generally settled into the United States are actually generally coming from Malaysia. The larger portion of our refugees in Chicago are from Malaysia. They fled Burma 15 years ago, and they spent a decade or more in Malaysia before finally getting resettled in the U.S. The average time for a refugee to be resettled, being from a camp, is 17 years. So most of the Rohingya are a reflection of that.
Your special interest is on LGBTQ refugees. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, so I have started focusing on LGBT refugees as a more vulnerable population within the already vulnerable refugee population. The people who identify as LGBT really have some separate needs outside of the regular refugee population. For example, when being resettled in the United States, refugees are generally coming with their family group, or they're joining family members, or they're joining a community of people from their country. If a person is fleeing from their country because they identify as LGBT or T, but fleeing from persecution in their country because they identify as LGBT or T, they're coming alone, and they're not joining family, and they generally don't want to join a community of people from their country because they're fleeing that persecution. So what's important is to make sure that these refugees are being settled in places that already have LGBT communities.
So what are some issues that refugees in camps might encounter?
Inside of a camp, there are a couple of different situations. You could have someone fleeing from their country because they identify as LGBT or T, and then going into a camp setting, they're not necessarily in a friendly environment. You can also have people, like Syrians are fleeing from their country because of war, and you can have people who identify as LGBT or T, they're fleeing because of war, but they still identify and could be persecuted for their identification depending where they're from. So in camp settings, it's important that it's hard. It's a hard issue to address because sometimes they will need like extra protection, extra security, or they'll be persecuted in the camp. There's also the flip side of like if you show preferential treatment to a certain population, that could also not work out well. So the UNHCR and different organizations have definitely been studying this and trying to figure out like what best practice is here, but there hasn't really been any definitive solution to this problem. I'm not sure there is a solution. But
How do you plan to make this issue a part of your professional career?
I'm not sure exactly yet. I do think that regardless of how I work in this field, where I end up going, that my study of this and my passion for learning about the LGBT perspective in refugees will benefit any organization, will benefit the populations that I work with, just because I do have just because I'm aware of some of the issues that are going on there. It's also one of the first things that I've studied that I thought like, wow, I could get a PhD in this. And I'm not sure that will actually happen. It's a nice feeling to have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.